D Rock here with another stream. Crypto market cap sitting at $1.094 trillion. Bitcoin dominance climbed to 43.7%. ETH dominance sitting at 19.1%. You can see Bitcoin has seen a bit of a rally here in the past 24 hours, sitting right now at $24,524. ETH just barely under $1,700. BNB back at 309. Cardano 34.5 cents. Matic at $1.18, Dogecoin at 7.4 cents. You can see the Dow Jones Industrial Average has rallied a bit today, but I do think we are forming more or less some lower highs, which could see some downside here leading later into the week. Taking a look at the 1 hour chart for Bitcoin, we can see that Bitcoin did not hold support right around 25,100, which would have been a critical level to hold. Right now, we're seeing 24,300. It's important to note that Bitcoin did go as high as a 26,400, roughly speaking. And we've seen almost a $2,000 retracement from this. And this only occurred about a few hours ago. So it's important to note that if Bitcoin does not hold these levels, this could have easily have been just a liquidity trap. I'm not trying to be bearish, but it definitely looks like that's the case unless we hold some lines of support right up here. Ideally, again, we would have held support right around 25.1, 25.2, but that does not seem to be the case. Again, looking at daily chart, we have a nice big wick, that went as high as 26.4. But again, we seem to be retracing two lines of support right above 24K. Again, we'll see if that holds. If not, you can see some more downside action out of Bitcoin. Again, this could be just a liquidity trap. So basically, just don't get too excited. Don't get too antsy with deploying all your capital while things look good. Right now, they may not look so great here in the next 24 hours. Taking a look at DXY again, we're seeing kind of big, some support forming out of DXY on the hourly. We can kind of see if we want to draw it. Can do this. Here, let's just do this. You can see kind of like more or less this trend, and then the line of support that it seems to be going after is right around a 103.576. Again, we'll see if this line of support holds. If not, can expect more and more downside out of DXY. And the way DXY usually works, if we see some downside action out of DXY, we do see stocks and crypto rally as a result. Now, if this decides to go up for whatever reason, up and to the right, can expect Bitcoin, stocks, and crypto to drop as a result. So, need to keep a close eye on that, you guys. Headed over to Twitter for some news. Bitcoin is rated as the world's 11th most valuable asset. Ethereum's ranked at number 52. Pretty crazy stuff, you guys. If you told me this was going to be the case just 5 years ago, I would have said you're a madman. But again, a lot of things have changed here in the past few years. More and more people are turning to Bitcoin and crypto as a store of value. Here we have banks are failing, and a record high 67.7% of all Bitcoin has not moved in over a year. The stage is set for parabolic bull run, unlike any other. Hyper Bitcoinization is here. Right around a million new Bitcoin addresses were generated this weekend, probably out of fear that if these individuals who created these addresses kept their money in the banks, that the banks would go under and essentially they wouldn't be able to pull their money out. So I think that is why we saw a crazy amount of Bitcoin addresses being generated in about a 48 to 72 hour span. people are learning to move their money around and put it in safer places in a store of value like Bitcoin. Magoo PhD says anyone now recommending any stable coin is either an utter moron or compromised. Act accordingly. Obviously, this tweet's from 4 days ago, so roughly Saturday, maybe late Friday. Um, but it's important to note that there were people in the crypto community pushing USDC even when it was 90 cents, when it should be pegged to $1 and shouldn't really fluctuate much from there. So anyone who's pushing stable coins in a bank run scenario like that is easily just trying to use his liquidity. Toby Cunningham says, I wouldn't be surprised to see Bitcoin alone at $5 trillion market cap by the end of the next bull run, with the amount of currency that's going to be printed from now until then. Again, essentially, the currency doesn't need to be printed for Bitcoin's market cap to increase significantly. We could just see bank runs occur, and just like we saw right around a million new Bitcoin addresses being generated in about a 48 to 72 hour span, with the fears of bank runs and such. All we need to see that is on a massive, on even a bigger scale, and I guarantee you more and more money is going to flow in Bitcoin. And as of right now, we're just talking about U.S. banks. That doesn't bring into play major banks across the world. Jim Cramer urging investors to sell their Bitcoin after the latest rally. Some people, as you can see, are taking this as a buy signal. Basically do the inverse or opposite of whatever Jim Cramer is pushing. Just a reminder that less than 1.7 million Bitcoin are left to be mined. Things are about to get real scarce. Remember, next year, about 450 days from now, the next Bitcoin halving occurs, meaning miners will be rewarded half the amount of Bitcoin for completing a block, which means Bitcoin is going to get more and more scarce as we move forward. So, again, adding to the value of the currency itself. We will see some sort of rally here in late 2024, probably most of 2025 as well. Kathy Wood personally bought $100,000 worth of Bitcoin for the first time when it was just $250 a piece. Talk about a nice ROI. Bitcoin is up over 20% in the last 24 hours. Our normie is starting to realize its protection against the broken fiat system. Could very well be. It's important to note that the masses are not buying into this. These are just people who have a bit of intuition, people who see where things are headed, and they're positioning themselves as such. Reminder that Binance is to lose its British pound on and off ramps provider in just 9 weeks. And other news, Binance is CZ from Binance put out a tweet given the changes in stablecoins and banks. Binance will convert the remaining of the 1 billion industry recovery initiative funds from BUSD to native crypto, including Bitcoin, BNB, and ETH. Some fund movements will occur on chain. In his words, just transparency. So there's that. Could the inflow that we've seen in Bitcoin and crypto here in the past 48 hours be because of CZ's, what's it called? Basically putting BUSD money into the crypto space. I think it is important to know. Let's see when this tweet was taken. Sorry. So the tweet was put out yesterday in the morning. Maybe people front ran that set of news to essentially make some money off of it. We can see that Bitcoin's market cap did rise about $25 billion worth. Again, that's nowhere near the amount of money that CZ put into it. We can see probably maybe like 300 to maybe 350 million. So pennies on the dollar comparison, all the volume that came into Bitcoin. But again, we do need to be wary that this very well may be just uh, a liquidity trap. So again, I'm along in the big grand scheme of things. We need to clear some higher levels before we get super bullish. And again, not financial advice, just my 2 cents. Um, Here we have Signature Bank board member says regulators shut down the bank to send a strong anti-crypto message. If you're aware, SVB or Silicon Valley Bank wasn't the only bank to go under over the weekend. Signature Bank also joined that list. And when Mashinsky was comparing Celsius with FDIC insured banks, saying that they FDIC don't have enough money to pay for like one branch, giving the impression to AMA watchers that they wouldn't be better protected in FDIC insured banks versus keeping their money in Celsius. Pretty crazy statement from Mashinsky, the scam artist. Get GTFO what? Alexander Mashinsky used Celsian's digital assets to invest in the mining business, create a separate entity called Celsius Mining LLC. Now, Judge Glenn states that the Celsius creditors are not entitled to own the mining business because it is a separate entity, according to the judge in Mashinsky. What an effing joke. Celsius was holding some of its funds in Signature Bank, which collapsed over the weekend. How convenient. And just a reminder that Silicon Valley Bank is the second biggest bank collapse in U.S. history, just behind the Washington Mutual Bank collapsing back during the 08 recession. Again, this just shows you how much assets they have on hand compared relative to their deposits. Again, and they call crypto a Ponzi scheme or a scam. Banks are arguably bigger scams. Silicon Valley Bank sued by shareholders for fraud. We'll see where that heads. Here we have Citadel CEO says U.S. capitalism is breaking down before our very eyes after the Federal Reserve rescued Silicon Valley Bank. If you recall, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen essentially teamed up with the Fed to fail out SVB along with a Signature Bank. What does this tell you? Well, the second and third largest bank failures in U.S. history just happened within 72 hours of each other, or roughly 3 days' time. My head is spinning. So Silicon Valley Bank had about 200 billion on its balance sheet. Ironically, 200 billion is also about how much we've sent to Ukraine. SVB customer withdrawal made history. $42 billion was withdrawn just this past Thursday. That's roughly $4.2 billion an hour, I guess, based off of business hours for SVB. Previous largest bank run in modern U.S. history was Washington Mutual Bank in 2008, which we see right here on the list. That's a little table. And that was roughly $16.7 billion over 10 days. We're seeing history being written. And as we discussed earlier, we have the Treasury along with Federal Reserve and FDIC essentially bailing out SVB and Signature Bank. And it's important to note that banking giants JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup trying to handle the largest movement of deposits in over a decade. So we can essentially probably make the claim that a lot of the money that's flowing out of SVB along with a Signature Bank is flowing over into JP Morgan Chase and Citigroup as citizens feel their money is safer there for whatever reason, or maybe they're just diversifying where they hold their money. And so it begins. Fed starts printing to save banks. Hyperinflation destroys the USD. All debts get a fresh start with the CBDC, people losing that CBDC, and inevitably Bitcoin becomes global currency. That's how Bitcoin for Freedom sees things going. And that's a little optimistic, but again, time will tell. As we've discussed in yesterday's stream, the governor of South Dakota vetoed a bill that changed the definition of money, which would have opened the door for the federal government to adopt a central bank digital currency, or CBDC. But more than 20 other states are facing similar legislation. Thank you, Tucker Carlson, for helping us get the word out. So pretty cool to see a governor pushing back on the language of which the government's trying to position what money is considered. So hopefully we see more and more states push back against CBDCs and the idea that Bitcoin and crypto, it cannot be considered money. Here's Bitcoin being the inverse of banks. As we can see, banks are losing big time. Meanwhile, Bitcoin seems to have gained considerably in the same time frame. Pretty significant development. Here's a look at the FDIC's balance sheet below. FDIC only has $125 billion, securing roughly $9.9 trillion. And that's roughly only 1.26%. FDIC may be able to protect the depositors at SVB, but it won't be able to do it if it happens to a few other banks. Again, quite the scary scenario. Only 1.26% of the balance sheet is secured. Pretty disgusting, pretty frightening scenario. What if we just have 3 to 5 more banks collapse? I think the house of cards is going to come tumbling down. Here we have Thomas Massey saying, understand what's happening at the FDIC right now. They're taking the insurance premiums that were paid in to protect depositors under $250,000, aka the little guys, and using it to cover depositors of the very, and using it to cover deposits of the very rich. They argue it benefits everyone to go all in on the first few banks. Well, the problem with going all in on the first few banks is when we start seeing a few other dominoes fall, it's going to be no getting your money out, no getting your money back. Those banks will not be able to be bailed out, more or less. Here we have a clip of George W. Bush back in 2008, essentially saying he had to abandon free market principles to save the free market system. And this is the whole thing with the Federal Reserve and bailouts and such. Essentially, you get to choose winners, or the government and entities like the Federal Reserve get to choose more or less winners. Even if the bank invested poorly, bought too many assets that they shouldn't have, don't have enough cash on hand, well, the government can essentially declare them a winner and still bail them out. Meanwhile, a bank that followed protocol and did everything right, for whatever reason, they collapse, they go under. The federal government can just pretty much declare them a loser, and they don't see a bailout. So we can see the problem here. This is not the way free markets work, or capitalism. And because of this, because we've seen a massive amount of US dollars being printed by the Federal Reserve and such, being printed out of thin air, we are seeing more and more countries look to abandon the dollar. Here we have the Saudis Iran peace brokered by China today. May very well be the cornerstone for petro yuan, oil being sold for Chinese yuan. Obviously, this attempt also paves the way for both Saudi Arabia and Iran to join BRICS, Imagine a BRICS plus with three oil giants, Russia, the Saudis, and the Iranians. How hard will it be to create a new currency that's backed by oil and gas? Endless possibilities in a multipolar world. So again, more and more countries going to do business not using the U.S. dollar, and that spells trouble for us here in the United States and the Western part of the world. And news came out today that U.S. Annual inflation rate slows to 6% in February. It's pretty laughable that we have people thinking this is a great thing. I mean, this goes to show you that inflation is anywhere between 2 to 3 times higher than where the Federal Reserve wants it to be, which spells quite a bit of trouble because that means the Federal Reserve is not doing as great of a job as they were hoping to essentially stomp out inflation, meaning they will have to up interest rates further to cool demand and bring inflation back down. Fed swaps now show that the most likely scenario is no more interest rate hikes. I think that is very unlikely. I do think we may be seeing a few more interest rate hikes here in the next 3 to 6 months. Not going to say they're going to go crazy and do like something like 0.75% or 75 basis point, but I do think 25 to 50 basis point rate hikes are definitely in the cards, so to speak. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there will be no more interest rate hikes. I doubt it though. Here we have an article about the German health minister Lauterbach falsifying his resume to get a professorship. Archival documents show, and we can see why this is an issue because this is a health minister who basically gets to decide public health policy over in the country of Germany. The fact that he's falsifying his resume just so he can get the position of power that he chooses is deeply concerning and deeply disturbing. And here we have Robert F. Kennedy. And the tweet reads, recipients of Bill Gates' favorite medical procedure were found to DIE at 10 times the rate as children who refused to take the medical procedure. Danish study looked at 30 years of records, and they found that the girl who had received the DTP medical procedure were 10 times more likely to DYE than children who refused to take the medical procedure, and they were dying not of things that anybody has ever associated with a medical procedure, stated Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They were dying of anemia and bilharzia and malaria and dysentery and pulmonary respiratory issues like pneumonia. Nobody had ever connected the dots until the Danish scientists came in and actually looked at the data. Again, not going to play the audio because we can see my video will most likely be taken off. I'll get a second strike, meaning I won't be able to upload for 2 weeks. So again, need to tread lightly with what I'm playing audio wise and reading out loud for you guys. But almost 3 years ago, I've been speaking out publicly about the Great Reset, but let's face it, the Elizabeth is still on track. What we perceive as victories against globalist agenda are merely setbacks despite a resistance. The world is almost fully met, took the medical procedure, cash is disappearing, and mass surveillance is expanding without much opposition. Sure, every now and then a politician who has discriminated against or lied to us is sacrificed, but he's just replaced with another WF, young global leader puppet. The pandemic is slowly fading from people's minds, making way for the climate change agenda. And under this pretext, our rights continue to be restricted bit by bit. The measures that will ultimately enslave us, presented as convenient, i.e., cashless payments through mobile apps, doorstep deliveries, and universal basic income, etc. If you realize that this is the path to a social credit system, those who speak up are labeled conspiracy theorists and ostracized from society, as I have been. It starts with losing your job, then bank accounts being frozen, eventually defamation. In the age of information overload, it's hard to discern what's true or not. And yet the super rich are laughing all the way to the bank, as they always do, because he who controls a narrative large part of the opposition cannot lose. They knew this all along, which is why they're so relaxed and open about their goals. Um, Perfect example of this is Klaus Schwab's reset, wishing you all great and hopefully a more optimistic Sunday. This is a tweet from Simon Godek, a doctor. Great take from him. Here we have no bailouts. Poso talking about, hi, Greta Thunberg. Why did you delete this? Greta Thunberg released a tweet about 5 years ago, back in June of 2018, saying a top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. Yeah, sure thing. Keep fear mongering, Greta Thunberg. You're doing a great job. I'm sure your parents are proud of you. This is rather disgusting that they would tell their daughter to say such horrific things. Kind of reminds me of Al Gore, who essentially said that the world would end sometime in 2012 if we did not make proper adjustments in the name of climate change. Too shocking to believe, James O'Keefe exposes government conspiracy to frame citizens at January 6th protests. This is what Project Veritas didn't want you to see when they ousted me. January 6th was a setup, frame job. Here we have basically James O'Keefe talking to a journalist, and the journalist talks about how many people were quoted as saying that they were terrified of society collapsing. They're terrified of democracy being threatened by uh, largely peaceful protesters over at the Capitol on January 6th. But again, Matthew Rosenberg, a journalist at the New York Times, is essentially paid to push that narrative that our democracy is being threatened. Here we have a tweet by Erica Marsh saying January 6th and 9/11, two of the worst days in American history. I would argue that January 6th was worse because the threat came from within and is clear and present danger to the United States. Again, what a clown world we live in, because if she were to know the facts about the two scenarios, the scenario on the left one citizen or one protester dead. The people that they like to claim that were police officers who died did not die that day. I believe a police officer had a heart attack the following day after January 6th, so January 7th. Not to mention on 9/11, supposedly something like a few thousand people died. So to compare the two is rather outrageous, but NPCs are going to be NPCs. Here we have a statement from Chamath. I thought this was kind of interesting. I thought I'd just show you guys it.
There's about 150 people that run the world. Anybody who wants to go into politics, they're all fucking puppets. Okay? There are 150, and they're all men that run the world. Period. Full stop. They control most of the important assets. They control the money flows. And these are not the tech entrepreneurs. Now, they are going to get rolled over the next 5 to 10 years by the people that are really underneath pulling the strings. There's about 150 people.
So, and again, kind of going back to that thing, that statement over here, it's like, as much as we want to believe that we're making victories, it's essentially just setbacks for the globalist agenda, i.e. the Great Reset and such. But that about does it for today's stream, you guys. Hopefully you guys found it educational, informative, entertaining, any of the above. If you did, please drop me a like and subscribe to the channel. Please share the video with your friends, family, as it essentially forces the algorithm to push my video out there as opposed to suppressing information seen in this video. But until tomorrow, please take care and invest wisely. I should see you all